The sky was burning. Ethan Carter stood frozen, his heart pounding as the city he once knew turned into fire and smoke. Explosions echoed through the night, shaking the ground beneath him. The war had begun, and humanity was losing. He had never believed in aliens, not until they arrived. They came in massive ships, their technology far beyond anything Earth had seen. At first, people thought they came in peace. But peace was a lie. Within days, they attacked. Now, Ethan watched as the streets filled with panicked people, running, screaming, trying to escape something they could not fight. The invaders were called Zokari, a ruthless race with metallic skin and glowing red eyes. They had no mercy. No warnings. No demands. Just destruction. Ethan gritted his teeth, gripping the metal pipe in his hand. It was useless against them, but in this war, even a pipe felt better than nothing. "Move," someone shouted behind him. A soldier. His armor was scratched, his face bloody. "Get to the evacuation zone." Ethan hesitated. "Run." "Where?" The world was falling apart. That's when he saw her. She stood alone in the middle of the street, untouched by the chaos. Her silver-white hair flowed in the wind, her violet eyes locked onto his. She wasn't human. An alien. But not a Zokari. Ethan knew her kind. The Velians, a race that had warned humanity about this war. No one had listened. Now, she was here, staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "You must come with me," she said, her voice calm despite the destruction around them. "Or you will die." Ethan clenched his fists. "Why should I trust you?" A deep rumble filled the air. He turned. One of the Zokari war machines, a towering mech, was charging through the street, crushing everything in its path. The Velian woman didn't flinch. "Because if you don't, you won't have another chance." For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Could he trust her? Then the war machine locked onto him. She grabbed his wrist. "Decide now, human." The Zokari opened fire. Ethan had no choice. He ran. The choice that changed everything. The night air howled as fire rained from the sky. Buildings crumbled, the streets cracked, and screams filled the air like a haunting melody of despair. But none of it mattered now, not the war, not the destruction. Because Ethan Carter had just made a choice. He had followed the alien woman. She led him through the wreckage, moving like a ghost through the chaos. Ethan struggled to keep up, his lungs burning, his legs aching. Behind them, the Zokari war machine scanned the area, searching, hunting. "Where are we going?" he demanded. "To safety." "That's not an answer." She finally turned, her violet eyes glowing in the dark. "Neither is wasting time. Do you want to survive or not?" Ethan swallowed hard. He wasn't sure. His world was gone. His people were dying. What was left to fight for? Then he thought of his sister. His friends. The millions who had no choice but to run. If there was a chance, any chance, he had to take it. A low hum vibrated through the air. The war machine had found them. The Velian's eyes widened. "Move. Now." She didn't wait for him to respond. She grabbed his wrist, and suddenly. They weren't there anymore. The world bent. 4-0. You said. Start with next part more unique. ChatGPT said. Part 3, The Fall into the Unknown. Ethan didn't have time to scream. 1 second, he was running through the ruined city. The next, the world ripped apart around him. His stomach lurched as if he had been yanked through 1,000 different places at once. His vision blurred, the air felt thick, and for a moment, just a single heartbeat, he swore he was floating in an abyss of light and darkness. Then, impact. His body slammed onto cold metal. The breath was knocked from his lungs, and for a few terrifying seconds, he lay there, gasping. His limbs felt like they belonged to someone else, weightless and numb. Then he heard her voice. "You're still alive. Good." Ethan forced his eyes open. The Velian woman stood over him, calm as ever, her silver-white hair glowing under dim blue lights. They weren't on Earth anymore. The room around them was sleek, curved, alien. Strange symbols flickered on floating screens, shifting in patterns he couldn't understand. The hum of energy pulsed beneath his hands. A ship. A Velian ship. What just happened? His voice came out raw, his brain still spinning. We jumped. Jumped? He sat up too fast, regret punched through his skull like a hammer. What the hell does that mean? She tilted her head. You humans call it teleportation. We call it survival. Ethan's breath caught. Wait, we left Earth. The Velian's expression hardened. She lifted her arm, and a holographic screen appeared in the air. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. Earth, his home, was beneath them. Burning. From orbit, he saw it all. The sprawling inferno of cities in ruin. The Zokari warships hovering like vultures. The last desperate flashes of human resistance, flickering out one by one. His chest tightened. His people were dying. Take me back. The Velian didn't answer. Ethan pushed himself up. I said take me back. To what? Her voice was sharp. Death? You wouldn't even last another hour down there. His hands curled into fists. He knew she was right. But it didn't matter. He couldn't abandon them. She studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. You don't understand yet, she said, turning away. But you will. The ship trembled. A new alert flashed across the screen. The Zokari had found them. And they were coming. The hunter and the prey. The ship's alarm wailed, a shrill, pulsing sound that sent ice down Ethan's spine. The Velian woman's calm demeanor vanished. She snapped her fingers, and the holographic screen expanded, revealing the impossible. A Zokari warship was right behind them. Not just any warship. A Hunter-class interceptor. Sleek, black, and armed with weapons that could tear through planets. It moved like a shadow against the stars, closing in fast. Ethan's pulse thundered. We need to run. The Velian tapped the air, and controls flickered to life beneath her fingers. No panic. No hesitation. The ship responded instantly, its engines roaring to full power. The stars outside stretched, space itself bending as they jumped into motion. But the Zokari followed. How are they keeping up? Ethan shouted. She didn't look at him. Because they've already marked us. Ethan had no idea what that meant, but the way her jaw clenched told him everything. It was bad. The screen flickered again. The Zokari ship was gaining. Then, without warning, a voice crackled through the comms. Cold, mechanical, dripping with menace. Run all you like, Velian. The hunt always ends the same. A chill swept through Ethan. The Zokari weren't just chasing them. They were toying with them. The Velian woman exhaled sharply. Then, for the first time since they met, she looked at Ethan like he mattered. I hope you're ready, she said, flipping a switch. The ship's floor shifted. Panels slid open. Weapons emerged. Shields activated. The hum of power filled the air, vibrating through Ethan's bones. He swallowed. Ready for what? She gave a small, dangerous smile. For your first real fight. Outside, the Zokari opened fire. The fire within. The ship screamed. Metal groaned as the Zokari's blast ripped through the shields, sending the entire craft spinning. Ethan barely had time to grab onto the console before gravity vanished. His body lifted off the floor, tumbling through the air as warning sirens blared. "Hold on," the Velian snapped. Ethan barely saw her hands move, but suddenly, gravity slammed back. He hit the floor hard, gasping. The ship stabilized just in time to dodge another beam of death that roared past the viewport. "Shields down to 32%, the AI voice announced. "We're not going to survive this," Ethan shouted. The Velian shot him a look, not of fear, but of calculation. "That depends," she said coolly, "on how much fight you have in you." Ethan's pulse pounded. What the hell does that mean? Another explosion rocked the ship. This time, Ethan heard something new, a Zokari boarding alarm. The Velian's eyes darkened. "It means they're done playing. They were coming inside." Ethan's breath caught. "Then we run, right?" She turned, pressing a hidden panel on the wall. It slid open, revealing a long, sleek pulse rifle. She tossed it to him. "No," she said. "We fight." The ship shuddered again. Then, a metallic clang. The Zokari had latched on. A deep, mechanical voice echoed through the speakers. "Surrender, human. The Velian cannot protect you." Ethan swallowed hard. His hands trembled as he gripped the rifle. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a guy trying to survive. But now, survival wasn't enough. The Velian stepped past him, her own weapon humming to life. She glanced at him, violet eyes glowing. "This is your moment, human," she said. "Make your move." The airlock exploded inward. And the battle began. Baptized in fire. The world erupted. Blazing white sparks rained as the ship's airlock was torn apart. The force of the explosion sucked the air from the room, pulling Ethan forward. His ears rang. His pulse hammered. Then, they stepped through. The Zokari warriors moved like living shadows, their metallic bodies glinting under the emergency lights. Their glowing red eyes locked onto Ethan with an eerie, unblinking hunger. The lead warrior stepped forward, nearly 7 feet tall, its blade-like arms flexing with lethal precision. Its voice was cold, hollow. Weak. Unarmed. Not even a challenge. Ethan's grip on the pulse rifle tightened. His palms were slick with sweat. His whole body screamed at him to run. The Velian didn't wait. She vanished, a blur of silver and shadow. Her rifle flared to life, sending blue streaks of plasma through the air. 2 Zokari fell instantly, their bodies hissing and sparking as they collapsed. Ethan barely had time to breathe before the lead warrior lunged at him. Instinct took over. He threw himself sideways, hitting the deck hard. The Zokari's blade arm slashed through the air, missing his head by inches. Too close. Ethan rolled, lifted the rifle, and fired. The shot went wide. The Zokari moved too fast. It grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing. Ethan's vision darkened. His fingers scrambled against the iron grip, but it was unbreakable. His rifle slipped from his grasp, clattering to the floor. This was it. He was going to die. Then, the Velian spoke. "Let him go," she said, her voice icy calm. "Or I show you what fear truly is." The Zokari warrior laughed. "You? A dying race? What can you possibly do?" Her answer was instant. She pressed a switch on her wristband. The ship's emergency lights flashed, once, twice, then cut to total darkness. A second later, the screaming began. Ethan hit the floor, gasping for breath. He couldn't see. But he heard. The snapping of metal. The wet, tearing sound of something being ripped apart. The Velian was no longer a warrior. She was a hunter. A dim red glow flickered back to life. The Zokari warrior that had nearly killed Ethan was now, pieces. The Velian stood over what was left, expression unreadable, her silver-white hair stained with something dark. She turned to Ethan. "You can stay on the floor," she said quietly. "Or you can learn how to survive." She tossed his rifle back to him. The ship rocked again, more Zokari were coming. Many more. Ethan looked down at the rifle in his shaking hands. And for the first time, he made a choice. He stood up. He was done running. The human who refused to fall. The moment Ethan stood, something inside him changed. The fear, the doubt. The instinct to run. It was gone. The ship shook violently as the next wave of Zokari forced their way inside, their razor-sharp limbs gleaming under the red emergency lights. Their movements were precise, calculated, hunters closing in on prey. Only this time. Ethan wasn't prey anymore. He raised the rifle, but he wasn't aiming wildly like before. He was ready. The first Zokari rushed forward. Ethan fired. The plasma round tore straight through the creature's metallic skull. Sparks flew, its body convulsing before collapsing into a twitching heap. For a fraction of a second, the remaining Zokari hesitated. That was their mistake. The Velian moved first. She was lightning, one with the shadows, her pulse blades igniting as she carved through their ranks like a dancer of death. Ethan followed her lead. No fear. No hesitation. Another Zokari leaped at him, he sidestepped, then slammed his rifle into its head, sending it crashing into the bulkhead. He fired again, and another enemy fell. One by one, the hunters became the hunted. For the first time, Ethan saw it. They weren't invincible. They bled. They died. The Zokari knew it too. The leader of the remaining warriors let out a deep, grinding growl. Unacceptable. Ethan clenched his jaw. Yeah. Well, get used to it. The Zokari raised a clawed hand, signaling to its troops. Not to attack, to retreat. They were leaving. Ethan exhaled, chest heaving, as the last of them disappeared into the wreckage. The battle was over. He had survived. But deep down, he knew, this was only the beginning. The Velian turned to him, wiping dark fluid from her blade. For the first time since they met, she nodded. Now, she said, voice steady. Now, you're ready. Ethan met her gaze, pulse still racing. He didn't know what came next. But he knew one thing for sure. He had made his move. And he was never going to be left behind again.